Okay, good evening, everyone. On behalf of Citizens for a Better City and our PTA partners, welcome to tonight's public forum for candidates running for the school board in next month's election. I'm Hal Lippman, president of CBC, the organization that has for more than 60 years worked to educate and involve our citizens in all matters of local governance. We have been very pleased to have with us as partners in this event, the Falls Church City Public Schools PTAs, and specifically their representative, Carolyn Bruce. Joining us on this special virtual event tonight are candidates Jared Anderson, Tate Gould, Courtney Mooney, David Ortiz, Ilya Shapiro, Lori Silberman, and Kathleen Tice. Tonight's discussion will be moderated by Cecily Shea, a longtime resident of our little city who for decades has exemplified the very best of what giving back to one's community means. She has served as PTA president, school board member, and most recently president of the Falls Church Education Foundation. In these and other related capacities, she has acquired vast knowledge of and experience with all facets of our city's public schools. She continues her years of dedicated commitment to the students, parents, teachers, administrators, and staff of the school community in her newest role, having started work as an assistant to the head of secondary schools a little over a month ago. Before we move on, let me provide a few pointers for viewers. Number one, the audience will only be able to watch and listen to the discussion. Number two, this event is best viewed in gallery mode, which makes it possible to see every candidate's face as if it's an in-person event. Gallery mode can be accessed from the view menu at the top right of your screen. Three, the chat option at the bottom of your screen will be on during the event. You can use it to share your thoughts with other viewers or ask for technical support, but we will not be taking questions from the audience. CBC event technical support volunteers will be monitoring the chat for audio or video problems. And now take it away, Cecily.
Thank you, Hal, and thank you, CBC and the PTAs. You do great work in our little city, and we thank you so much for sponsoring this forum. And hello, candidates, and to the audience, thank you for being engaged and informed voters, and welcome to this evening's forum. And here's how tonight's going to work. Each candidate will be able to answer each question, and the order in which they answer the question has been chosen by a randomizer. Some of the questions will have 2-minute answers, others will be 1 minute, and there will be a couple of lightning rounds thrown in just for good measure. And I will let the candidates know how much time is allotted for each question. And since we're all neighbors, and we're all going to be using our first names in this forum, since that's how we greet each other on the streets. And the questions I'm asking have come from the PTAs and from the CBC. So let's begin with question number 1. You're going to have 2 minutes to answer this question. The school board has many difficult decisions to make, some of which are unpopular at the time. Today, IB is a part of the Falls Church City Schools DNA. The decision to expand from the IB diploma program to the elementary years and then the middle years programs was a controversial one. What would be your approach to making difficult decisions that face controversy? And the first person is Kathleen, and you have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. I would just say that when I'm making difficult decisions, when I've led other organizations, especially ones that are involving children, president of the PTA or through my preschool, I always just brought it back to what was best for the child and for each student, and trying to think of what was really best for the student population. And sometimes you have to get that tunnel vision to keep your priorities straight and not get too distracted by things becoming too political or too divisive. I think sometimes being a leader absolutely requires unpopular decisions, and sometimes it's not always representing the majority. Sometimes it's looking out for the best, the safety and the needs of a minority group that needs to be protected and represented. So I think I would just use what's in the best interest of the students and the student population as a whole, and guiding my decisions there. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. And the next candidate to answer the question is Tate.
All right, thank you. The process of making difficult decisions is going to be something that this is what I signed up for. I think this is what we all signed up for in terms of understanding many of the policies that are going to be coming and facing our community are going to be difficult. And we're seeing this across the country in the school districts that I know the company that I run that we work with, and how to navigate those. So the process really begins with, at least from my core values, is a listening first approach. This school board is a community represented school board. That's who we are elected to serve. And so I think some people try to, the concept of listening to reply is not really what I abide by. I listen to understand. And that is something that we have to do. We have to collect the feedback from the community. We have to have those opportunities for whether it's the office hours that the current school board has instituted, whether it's the committees that we have already instituted, but it's also the listening to our teachers and staff is critical to make sure that we have them at the table, the decision-making table, not in the room, but at the decision-making table, and making sure we're getting their input. They have been on the front lines for the last year and a half of a very, very difficult chapter. And so it's important to make sure that they are not set aside. So that's how I do it, is I listen first. We bring in the right people. We have the right opportunities. We have the right avenues for collecting that feedback. And in terms of making a decision, I've worked in very difficult political avenues at the federal level, at the state level, in my private company. So I'm used to making very difficult decisions. And I do it all the time. Looking forward to doing it for our city. So thank you.
Thank you, Tate. And Courtney, how would you make controversial decisions?
Great question. Well, I think for me, the two things that can be summed up is communication and transparency. That's one of the reasons that I got into this race is I think, one, it's important to fully understand the topic and the decision and be well informed around what we're discussing. I think it's important that we be proactive with our stakeholders and encourage feedback and actually go out and seek feedback, whether that's from the parents in the community or whether that's from our teachers and staff within the school system itself. I think it's openly discussing the decision-making process and letting people hear their thoughts, concerns, and feedback be represented in a public sphere so that they can understand that the feedback that they're providing us is something that's being taken into consideration. And so that we have a transparent process in place where people see themselves being represented and hear their thoughts and concerns being reflected. And then I think it's also critically important that once we make a decision, that we're very clear about why we reached the decision that we made and why we're going the directions that we are. Not every decision has to be a popular one, but I think it needs to be justifiable and defendable, and there has to be accountability around it. And so when we have transparency and communication in place and proactive reach outs to our stakeholders, I think that really goes a long way into opening up this process to everyone so that they feel represented.
Thank you, Courtney. Jared, how about you?
So I think, it's very important to understand what the goals of a particular decision are, and having those stated first before considering any options. I think it's very important to list out the goals that you're trying to achieve. And then once that is understood, then you can move on and engage who needs to be engaged. So whether it's the staff, whether it's the parents, whether it's the wider community, whether it's the students, I think it's very important to get a broad view of what the community thinks about it. It doesn't necessarily doesn't mean that it has to be a majority opinion rules every time, but I think it's very important to understand where the community is on a particular issue. And then also, say if it was the IB expansion, then it's also important to consider what the data is and what the research shows on a particular topic, and have those particularly informed opinions to present to the board at some point, so that you get a deep understanding as much as you can. And then you come to a decision, and a decision is always based on not just one choice, but many choices. It should never be that we're thinking about this, but there should always be the opportunity cost involved in a choice. Those should always be considered. And then once you have all those things lined up, then I think it's important to ensure that with each option, you list what are the pros and cons and why you chose a particular option versus why you didn't choose an alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Ilya, how about you?
Well, thanks very much. Thanks to the CBC and to the PTAs for hosting this forum. Just to reintroduce myself to people who weren't turning in the first time, my name is Ilya Shapiro. I'm a constitutional lawyer, a civil rights advocate, an author, an educator, and most importantly, a husband and a dad, a t-ball coach when my kindergartner wants to play, and the first ever Jewish Santa at Doolin Preschool, where my wife is the president. And in all those roles, I think both personally and professionally, I've had experience dealing with opposing parties, earning the praise and ire of different people, and sometimes big P parties, the political parties in various ways. And the key is really to maintain open lines of communication to make sure that stakeholders are all being heard and listened to and asked for their opinions. I think we need to do more climate surveys. I'm glad that this current one that's being done as part of the strategic planning is being done, but we need an independent survey of teachers. I know the superintendent has resisted that, but I think teachers and administrators sometimes have divergent interests. And so if elected, I'd certainly listen to the teachers as well. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all looking for the interests of the students. We're all parents or taxpayers who care deeply about the city. And I just want to make sure that everyone is accountable. There's been a loss of trust and confidence in the school board the last year and a half that COVID, I think, revealed. I think there's a reason why no incumbents are running for re-election. And I want to change that. I want to get the board to be more engaged, to listen to more people, to be open and transparent, and fundamentally to debate and vote on more things. Boards around us, I think, vote on more policies, which the current superintendent says is just operational. But I think there's a lot of governance for this board to be doing. And that way you can draw more people in. And even if you disagree with what the board does, even if you disagree with what I do, which I plan to explain online, I think you can at least appreciate where everyone's coming from.
Thank you very much. Lori, how about you? How would you be making difficult decisions that face controversy?
Thank you for that question. And also, again, thank you to the CBC and the PTA for hosting this evening. I'm running on communication and collaboration and community. Those three things are really important to me. And I think that directly feeds into this question. I know there's going to be tough decisions, and every decision that I make, whether we agree or disagree, will always come from doing what's best for our kids, whether it's somebody's preference or not. And in order to reach that decision, what's already been mentioned before is really bringing in the stakeholders to the table in order to collaborate together and hearing the different viewpoints and understanding where people come from. That mode of communication also should vary because some people might prefer surveys, other people might prefer Zoom meetings, other people might prefer in-person meetings. Whatever the mode of communication is, I think we need to make sure there are many options and times of day for people to participate so that if it's during working hours or evening hours, whatever it may be, everybody can really feel authentically heard and everyone can put in their input. I really like the fact that on strategic planning, we have the opportunity to, as parents and the community, actually, according to, I think, this morning's announcements, to give some input on the strategic plan. And so those decisions, just bringing everybody together, bringing all the stakeholders together, listening to varying, both sides, if it's a controversial issue, and then making the best decision based on that information. Again, whether you agree or disagree, it's always going to come from a place of caring about what's best for our kids. Thank you,
Lori. David, how about you?
Thanks, Cecily, and thanks to the CBC and the PTAs for hosting this forum. In 2006, a year after Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans and the coast, I was part of a team that worked for 6 years to develop a plan for the protection and the revitalization of that coast. And in order to do that, we engaged directly with the various communities, oystermen, fishermen, indigenous communities, businessmen that needed to be protected by levees, and the list was pretty long. We engaged them directly and heard from them about what their interests were and what they needed out of a plan. And then what we did is we worked together as a group of policymakers to put that into a framework that allowed us to show each of those groups how we integrated their points of view. That allowed us to develop a $50 billion plan that went into place and is still being implemented, but the success of that was shown this year when Hurricane Ida did not overrun the levees in New Orleans. So translating that to the school board, what we do is we can agree on a couple of goals. Those goals are that we want the best for our children and that we want the choices that we make to be sustainable for our children as they move through the schools and for those who are just entering the schools. And then by engaging directly with the various groups, and it's not to say that they're in opposition, it's just that they have different interests. And we find out exactly how their interests mesh with those goals and what we're trying to accomplish. We're able to put together a very, very cohesive plan for almost any problem that isn't antagonistic and that can achieve most people's interests and help us to come out of that tough decision-making process with a good, strong, sustainable decision that's able to endure for the future and that doesn't leave hard feelings. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to our next question. And as I said, the order has been chosen by randomizer. So we're going to mix things up than other forums that you've watched or been a part of, most likely. So this next question is a 1-minute question. It's a short answer. You know, in school, you've got your essay, your short answer, you fill in the blank. So this is the short answer version.
Are we going to have multiple choice, Cecily?
No multiple choice, but a yes, no later on. So you'll have that. If the school budget had to be cut in the coming year due to some unforeseen budget pressure, what is the one program or budget category where you would support a reduction in spending? And similarly, if you can increase school spending, where would you put that increase? And the first person to answer that is Jared.
Thank you, Cecily. So if it had to be cut, I would actually engage the administration and the staff in order to figure out where things could be moved around and what things might be able to be cut. I would not want to presume by myself that I know exactly what it needs to be. So I would certainly engage the staff and the community in order to figure out where things can be cut. I would prioritize ensuring that the services going to special populations, so special needs, English language learners, that those would be protected, because I think it's very important to ensure that those who need the most resources get those resources. Given that we do have a 900.
Your minute is up, so we'll have to hear from you when you're walking around the community, what you would add, what you would increase to the budget. Thank you. Courtney, how about you? What budget reductions would you make, and what increases, where would you do an increase?
Yeah, and I do think that this is a tough question, because I think that budget, depending on what is going on within our community and within our environment, can vary, right? Sometimes some years things need more budgetary importance than others. So I would agree with Jared that I think that needs to be a collective conversation. When it comes to where I would like to see budget surpluses go, I definitely think after the last 18 months, we need to be carefully looking at the mental health and emotional well-being of our children, as well as certain educational losses or kids where they could have been someplace this year that maybe they didn't because of the challenges of learning last year. So that's where I would like to see budget surpluses be focused here in the next couple of years: educational and emotional, educational loss and emotional mental well-being.
Great, thank you, Courtney. Ilya, how about you?
Yeah, first of all, I'm trying to get the attention of this motion sensor. I'm in a colleague's office at the University of Mississippi where I'm teaching constitutional law. So it's not that I've never Zoomed before. Anyway, maybe I'll just come from the dark the whole time. But really, we should survey teachers, staff, parents, and students with ideas sent directly to the school board. I think this would go a long way towards rebuilding the credibility that the board lost when it ignored the community's views during the renaming process and during COVID. But in the meantime, whether we're talking about cutting or spending more money, I think we need to spend the money on teachers and school buildings, not more central office staff. Sorry about that, Cecily. No offense to to you.
I'm not at the
Co-
central office, so that's
Well,
okay.
they're good. I'm safe. I didn't walk into onto a landmine. COVID testing to stay and to remain, bonus pay for substitute teachers, summer school and other remedial measures for learning loss. I've heard that the athletic programs might be underfunded, or there's the snack bar, press box, restrooms at the new athletic field, or the old athletic field. Really, I have lots of ideas.
Yeah,
Thank you
very much. I gave you a little extra time there since did our back and forth. So thank you. Tate, how about you?
Thanks. Yeah, lots of experience with education budgets over the years. And if you want to see turf wars, you either have budget cuts or budget surpluses, and those will bring everybody out. The best philosophy that I've worked with in both the government experience, what I've worked with education budgets, as well as the private experience, you have to do it together. You can't have people separate, and you can't have people try to vie for what the cuts. You have to do it together as a community or as a group or as an organization. And that's how I've done it in the companies that I've run, or the teams that I've worked in the government. But on the surplus side, which we do have a surplus, we have a significant surplus. It's not the typical surplus that we're expecting. This is a surplus based on COVID. It's based on a lot of holes and a lot of opportunities lost. And so we really need to focus all of that surplus money on addressing the loss, both social, emotional, and academic. And there's a number of evidence-based practices that we should be investing in that have been put out by the Institute of Education Sciences, the NSF of Education, that we can do to try to get our kids back up to speed and help our teachers. So.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's thoughts. And this is a hard one because you have to think fast and speak fast to get your answer out. David, you are next.
Thanks, Cecily. I've been responsible for my own budgets and for making these hard decisions. Understanding, of course, that if there were a budget shortfall, that would be a collective decision. Places to look for that are in non-core functions. And as Ilya said, in the central office staff and in other areas where they are in support of the core teaching mission of the Falls Church City Public Schools. That's where you would start looking for those cuts and expect them to take a disproportionate share of any that were to occur. As a matter of course, with respect to the budget surplus, that money was appropriated for certain means and not used, so it actually belongs to the city. But if as the school board and FCCPS puts together proposals, what I've said and where my priorities are is in enhancing mental and emotional health, and also promoting our work on equity, of which we've only just begun.
Thank you, David. Kathleen, how about you with budget cuts, budget increase and budget cuts? And I think you are frozen. Hey, Pete, can you help Kathleen possibly with some technology? And we're going to move on to Lori, and then we'll come back to Kathleen.
I'm going to answer this in the reverse. I really think that what we need to be focusing on right now is, which has already been mentioned this evening, is mental health resources. Honestly, for our students, but also our teachers and staff right now are really struggling statewide and nationally. In Richmond, there's a school that just closed today because too many teachers are burning out from everything that's been put on their plates. There's a school in a high school in Ohio that just shut down because they don't have the teaching staff. We really need to be making sure that we're taking care of our students and everybody that's part of the school community, just to make sure that we can function as well as we hope and expect to function for our children. And then in terms of cutting, I do think it's really important, again, to bring stakeholders in order to answer that question. Looking at the non-teaching roles, more of the administrative staff is, yes, a first place to look. But I would, in order to answer that, I'd really have to hear from everybody who is in those roles.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah. All right, Kathleen is back. Kathleen, were you able to hear the question?
Yes, sorry. I don't know why my internet just popped off for no reason out of nowhere. So sorry about that.
That's all right. Go ahead. It's your turn now.
Okay. Well, I just always come back to people. So I think people are our greatest resource. So in terms of cutting, I would do things that wouldn't impact people as much. So if it was the materials or supplies or technology, I mean, an amazing teacher is an amazing teacher, and they can make it work with minimal things if they have the environment that they need and the time and support that they need. So that's where I would probably look for first with cuts. And then in terms of increases, if they were really devoted to being spent in the schools, I would look again to support our staff, like maybe increasing the number of staff if there's gaps or they need more people, or further supporting the people in the buildings with their compensation and benefits, and making sure that that they have what they need in that respect.
Great, thank you all. We're going to move on to the next question now. And this is a 2-minute question, and it's from the PTAs. Describe your understanding of how the school board functions in relation to the superintendent. If you disagree with the superintendent, how will you manage that? How would you, as a school board member, hold the superintendent accountable? And the first person to answer this question is David.
Hi there. Thank you for that question. The superintendent is essentially the one employee of the school board. And he's the one that the school board uses to ensure that the policies are implemented effectively, and that the budget that is ultimately approved by the city council is deployed as intended. And so therefore, the way that is done is that's essentially an executive management task. It's not to say that you don't work closely with your executives, but that you have to make it clear how you're managing them. In my day job, I manage a team of executives that runs an office, a federal program office, and I'm very familiar with executive oversight and executive evaluation, and also executive development. And so the way that I think that the school board should be working with the superintendent is, hand in hand on day-to-day issues like they do every day, but at the same time, taking a very, very explicit evaluation step. And best practices for doing that are through 360 reviews, through employee surveys, and then also through specific and exact metrics based upon execution of the key functions, the developmental implementation of the policies and the execution of the budget. And in doing that, you're able to work effectively with the superintendent, hold that person accountable, and then also discover where there may be gaps and put that person on a path to improving.
Thank you so much, David. Jared, how about you?
So the superintendent, as David mentioned, is the employee of the school board, and he's there to perform the day-to-day functions, ensuring that the administration of the schools is going well. And it is the school board's job to oversee the superintendent, and it's also the school board's job to gather as much information as needed in order to evaluate the superintendent as best they can. So that means getting evaluations from staff, getting feedback from the community, to understand what the conduct of the schools is. That's explicitly put in the school board policies. And I think it's very important that the school board is there to help ensure that the superintendent is the best superintendent that superintendent can be. And so where they might need help, need coaching, that's what the school board's there for. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Tate, how about you?
Yeah, I probably not reiterate the role or the function of the school board and its relationship with the superintendent. So maybe I'll address how I would approach the role. And I think as approaching the role from a school board member, it is something that this is what I signed up for, in terms of I understand that I would be one of 7 managers of the superintendent. He would be the employee of the school board. That role and that ability to manage and to coach and to mentor is something that I'm really looking forward to establishing with our superintendent. Clearly, the approaching this from my education experience, working with state superintendents and district superintendents across the country, both in my role in the private sector, but also in the federal role that I had for 7 years. I have significant experience working with superintendents, not just with other people, but with superintendents, and what the pressures and the style and the stress that they go under. And so I would be looking forward to helping that. The aspect, though, how I would do that is important. I really strongly believe that he is the employee of the school board. And so to come in and to provide an antagonistic or a caustic relationship with that superintendent is not going to serve our community well. I understand that I would be responsible for his professional development, responsible for coaching, responsible for managing him to be successful. I think we all have had bosses, and hopefully as candidates, we've all been a boss, and we understand that if that relationship is positive, then we're going to feel safe. We're going to be able to grow. And that's the approach I have. I'm a confident manager. I have hired many people over my career, and I'm excited about that. And I've made many mistakes as a manager, but that positive, that understanding, that management, that role is something I've done again as a CEO of the companies that I run, as well as in my government experience in education the last 25 years.
Great, thank you so much. Lori, how about you? How would you manage a superintendent?
Sure. Again, kind of piggybacking on some of the previous statements made by many of us here. I'm really running to be a reasonable and thoughtful voice on the school board. I'm not running to walk in and be antagonistic and to throw the baby out with the bathwater or make any huge changes. That being said, again, the superintendent being the employee of the school board, I really want to work with Dr. Noonan and make him, in all of our interests, it's the best thing for us to make him the best superintendent he can possibly be. And I see many areas where we can work together. And if I ever disagree with him, I would approach him on that disagreement and have a reasonable and thoughtful conversation about a disagreement and see if we can find common ground, because I think finding common ground is what's going to work best for our kids. And holding him accountable, there's evaluations that come out. When the school board does his evaluation, there can be 360 reviews. I would also like to get some teacher feedback and staff feedback in order to get their viewpoints on areas for improvement. And again, just to make him the best superintendent that he can be for our schools.
Thank you, Lori. Kathleen.
All right, thank you. And ultimately, the school board is the biggest responsibility. Their primary responsibility is making sure that they provide an excellent education to all the students that they serve. And so I think when the school board and the superintendent are working together in a collaborative relationship that's built on mutual trust and open communication, I think that's when you're going to provide the best service to the students. I think that getting to that point, it's not about rubber stamping and just approving everything the superintendent does. I think it's about working together throughout a project and setting sort of mutual goals with ways to track them along the way to make sure that the school board and the superintendent are hearing each other and remaining on the same page, so that when it's time for a public meeting or a public vote, there's already an understanding and there's already been compromise made. And I think that's the time where it's time for teamwork and being a collective voice, presenting decisions to the community. We talked about making hard decisions, and sometimes we're definitely gonna have to do that as a community and as a school board. But I think by the time you get to a public meeting, that's the time to present a united front, explaining a decision and how we collaboratively got to that. And I think as long as we keep that progress focused on reflecting the values and the priorities of the community, I think it should be able to, the school board and the superintendent should be able to work together to make sure that. And I do want to say that I know a couple of people have mentioned it, but I'm really interested in the idea of implementing some 360 reviews and how that would look throughout the community, giving teachers and parents and students a voice while also sort of respecting the professionalism of teachers, and I think and the administrators top down, all the way from the superintendent down. So I think that's an interesting thing that would need a lot of debate and discussion on how to implement, but I think that has a lot of value.
Great, thank you so much. Ilya, you're the last one standing here. Well, how about it's your turn to answer the question. Oh, Courtney, I forgot Courtney. Yes, I'm sorry. Don't forget me. Ilya, you're next, and Courtney.
Sure. Well, look, I'm running to preserve and maintain our excellent public schools while improving the board's accountability and responsiveness to the community. So I'm not here to reinvent the superintendent's job. I'm here to reform how the school board performs its own job. And the board does a good job of writing and updating policies, plural. Nearly every meeting agenda includes a first reading, a second reading, or adoption of a new or revised board policy. An example of this is the new diversity, equity, inclusion policy that says FCCPS will practice and promote anti-racism. Now, I haven't criticized this policy for what it says because it's short on specifics, but for what it doesn't say. The board should have defined how anti-racism will be addressed in classrooms so parents know what to expect. But while the board sets lots of policies, it's failed to set policy, and that's its primary duty, to govern, to oversee, to manage. A politically healthy board will vote on the big issues like school closures, vaccine and mask mandates, and COVID testing. Other districts vote on these policies, and it gives their superintendents the political authority to implement them. But here, our board has deferred too much to the superintendent. It never votes on the big things except for changing school names. Now, I'm not saying the superintendent always gets it wrong. I actually think he gets a lot of things right. I gave him a good grade during the last forum, but I do think that his definition of operations versus policy or governance has had the unintended consequence of making the board politically irrelevant. That's a bad result for our community, and we need to fix it. We need to rebalance that separation of powers, if you will, to use a constitutional term. That's one of the reasons that I'm running.
Thank you, Ilya. Okay, now Courtney, I will not forget you again. And your name is right here on the randomized list.
No worries.
Sorry about that.
So yeah, I'm not going to belabor the point of what I think that the school board's role is as far as policy and governance, and that the superintendent is our employee, and we should strive to work with him to ensure that he's the best employee he can possibly be, because that makes our school a better place, right? But we are elected to represent the community, and our job when governing and overseeing the superintendent is to reflect the community in open discussions. And so I think one of the things that I would most like to change is engaging the superintendent in more questions and answers throughout our public meetings. I think that the community wants to hear these conversations. I think that being part of these conversations and us representing these conversations is critically important to them. I think that feeling like they don't understand how things are playing out and they don't understand what is being discussed with the superintendent is one of the disconnects that is currently facing our system right now. And so one of the things that I want to encourage, there's no wrong answers here. If we can set the tone of non-judgmental, open, transparent conversations, conducted in a respectful way that is moving towards a collaborative goal of putting our children first, we can have healthy and productive discussions around the things that matter to all of us, and that's our kids, and ensuring that our school is great. And I'm super committed to making sure that that plays out in public forums. And that's one of the reasons that I'm running. So I think that that's a critically missing piece that I would like to see be much more part of our discussions when it comes to school board and our superintendent.
Great, thank you, Courtney. All right, we're going to go back to short answers on this one. So you have 1 minute each, and the question is, what is one positive and one negative that you see in the schools, and what specific actions would you take to correct the negative? And Courtney, you're up next again.
Can you repeat that question one more time? I got caught on the positive and the negative, and I was thinking.
Yeah, what is one positive and one negative that you see in the schools, and what specific actions would you take to correct the negative?
Okay, perfect. Well, I think one positive is we have a great parental community, and we have super engaged teachers that truly care. And I think that that's a great positive that can't be emphasized enough. I think negative is a real hesitant to have open conversations with each other, to engage each other around our thoughts and our concerns. And people are always afraid of, not wanting to upset someone or step on someone's toes or be seen as, approaching someone because they have a concern and they don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And I think that if we can set the tone and change the environment of encouraging honest, non-judgmental conversations where people feel like they can be open about their thoughts and what they'd like to see, both with our staff and our teachers, as well as our parents, I would most like to change that. I'm a big no judgment zone person. I want to encourage those kinds of conversations where people feel like they can come to the table and feel heard. And that's what I would like to change the most.
Thank you, Courtney.
Sure.
Lori, what what positive and negative do you see, and what specific changes do you think should
Sure.
occur?
So mine kind of go hand in hand. The positive that I see is that we just passed about some months ago the diversity, equity, inclusion statement. I think it's a great policy on paper. I think that the board did a very good job at laying out kind of what our goals are when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. The negative is that it has nothing, I wouldn't say nothing. I don't believe enough of it has been implemented yet, and that we need to really start putting some funding behind some of the ideas that are in there, especially in light of Dr. Noonan's email last week about some racial issues that were going on in our schools, making sure that those policies are implemented. One thing that I really talk to my kids about who are 5 and 8, they're the youngest grades, are these topics, and making sure that they understand people from different backgrounds and different races, and making sure that the curriculum is implemented in the classroom, making sure that our hiring pool of teachers and staff, while you always hire the best person, that the pool of resumes is reflective of the community and greater community.
Thank you. Ilya, how about you?
Well, I think it's great that we have such parental support and indeed community support for our stellar public school system. It doesn't mean we're perfect, doesn't mean we can't improve, but I think it's right that within Virginia and indeed nationwide, our system gets great grades. Under Virginia's Constitution, I think it's Article 8, all students are entitled to a free and appropriate education. And both state and federal courts have found that parents have the right to direct their kids' education. So again, it's great that parents are so engaged, and those who raise concerns shouldn't be dismissed as noisy parents. I think constructive criticism should be welcomed. And if I'm elected, it will be. One thing to address beyond that kind of process consideration is the kids in the middle. I hear a lot that we have a great IB, we have support for kids with disabilities, but sometimes those in the middle, which any other district, they might be above average or the superstars. But here, we want to make sure that nobody is getting lost, and there are programs in STEM and math and otherwise to make sure that, again, in this survey, we'll reveal what parents really can identify that needs improvement.
Thanks. Thanks, Ilya. Jared, a positive, negative, and how you would correct the negative.
Sure. I think, one of the positives that I think a lot of people mentioned in the League of Women Voters Forum is our talented teacher pool and our talented staff pool. We have amazing people taking care of our children and educating our children. And I think that's something that should be ensured through appropriate compensation and ensuring that they are given the best employment environment as they can. I think one of the negatives is that we don't ask them kind of what they think can be done better. I think it's very important for the people on the ground with our kids to have a way of voicing how they see how they might be able to improve the education for our children. And I think ensuring that they have a voice, whether it is through an annual teacher survey, through collective bargaining, whatever, I think we should be able to engage staff so that we can continue our educational excellence and ensure that we get better.
Thank you so much, Jared. Tate, question is next to you.
Yeah, no, the clear positive in our community is our teaching staff. I mean, we can have the best buildings, we can have all the resources, we can have a lot of parental support and community, but at the end of the day, our teachers are the ones that are actually implementing and delivering that. And I've worked in very difficult school settings and very easy school settings, and all across the board, it always comes down to how those teachers, how they feel supported, the teachers, the staff, the coaches, the advisors. So that is our positive, and we've got to make sure that, unfortunately, I think that's also the negative that we have. We do not have the supports that we need. We always talk about learning loss with our social and emotional loss for our kids, but our teachers are exhausted, our staff are exhausted, and we need to really double down and try to understand how we can address both providing resources, providing direct in-class instruction to help them out, to make sure that they have what they need to do their job and to continue to make our school system one of the best that there is.
Thank you, Tate. David, you're up next.
Thanks, Cecily. I appreciate all my fellow candidates' answers. My answer is going to be somewhat specific to my experience now as a parent of children who have gone through the schools and are now their own young adults. And that's that that the Falls Church City Public Schools truly takes an interest and a commitment to give every child the skills that they need to grow into the person that they are going to become. And I see that in my two children who are very, very different and who are getting all the support from different angles that they need. And I think it's just terrific. And I hope that other parents see the same. As far as a negative, it's the fact that we have still too much racism and too much bullying in our schools. And I'm heartened by the fact that that 400 high school students walked out yesterday, and that a number of them shared their experiences with racism. And that my hope is that through working with our students and our wonderful teachers and staff, and as well as following through and implementing the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, we can build our students into the kinds of people who will build that more just nation.
Great. Thank you so much, David. Kathleen.
All right, thank you. Unfortunately, I feel like I'm going to be a little bit of an echo for some of these previous answers going at the end of the line here. But our positive, I will just say, yes, it's absolutely our teachers, but it's also the way our teachers and our parents really support each other. I was just so heartened time and time again when I was serving through the PTA on watching how supportive our parents were of our teachers and how appreciative they were. And I just hope that continues. I know the teachers have absolutely been through the ringer. And I hope that that is still the case. I'm sure it is. I know the PTA is doing awesome work to support our teachers. And that was one of the big blessings of my role with the PTA, is getting to see that sort of firsthand, watching our teachers really meet their students where they are as individuals, as David said, and really being able to marry. I taught in the SOL school and I taught in an IB school. I never did them together. So the way they're really able to marry like the Virginia curriculum and all the expectations of the SOLs within the IB framework. I guess I ran out of time for the negative.
Yeah, and we'll be able to hear that from you as you're walking around campaigning, thanks. Or we'll find you at the farmer's market. Okay, this next question, this is from the CBC Executive Committee. This is a 2-minute question. This election has some candidates who have financed their campaign significantly from outside Falls Church. Some have had the wherewithal to self-fund, while others have raised funds from predominantly local sources. What are your views regarding these types of campaign financing and their possible impact on decisions by those elected in Falls Church? And David, you're up first for that question.
Thanks, Cecily. Sorry, there was a noise back there. Let me talk about my campaign, how my campaign is financed. It's about half of my own funding, and then some about a quarter from outside, basically friends and family, and then a quarter from inside the community. And it's not very much. And it doesn't need to be very much. You know, this is a school board for a district that has 2,800 kids in a town that has 13,000 people. We can literally knock on every door, and Jared has probably outrun most of us, but we've all been out there knocking on doors, and that's really the kind of retail politics, and that's kind of the retail service that this is about. You know, when you have tens of thousands of dollars for, and multiple dollars per voter, really, for a campaign of like this, it kind of speaks, I think, a little bit, and perhaps it wasn't expected, and it's, I don't like to impugn anybody else's motives, but I think it's very clear, I think you have to make very clear as a candidate that you speak your own voice, and that you're here truly to serve the community. And and that's a much tougher hurdle to come over when you have to answer those kinds of questions, especially in terms of the public trust. So I'm glad that I don't have to make that, and others don't as well. And if you do, well, then, that's not an insurmountable barrier. It's just, something that you have to take into account.
You're muted, Cecily. You're muted. We can't hear you. You're calling on. Sorry.
Thank you. Jared, your turn.
Sure, I guess I can answer this mostly just from my experience. I was able to put a little bit of money of my own into the campaign, and I started asking friends and family and neighbors, and I was overwhelmed by the generosity that people showed to me, and the trust that they had in me to I haven't seen some of these people in 5 years, and they said, "Yeah, I think you'd be great," and they gave me a few dollars, and it was really amazing, the outpouring of support that I got from lots of people, from neighbors, from high school friends, from college friends, from grad school friends, from my church family out in California, and so I've gotten like much more money than I ever thought I would. But I also don't think I'm beholden to anybody who's giving me money. I'm here to serve our children and ensure that they get the best education that they can, and I think that's what we're all here to do.
Thank you, Jared. Ilya, the question is to you next.
Yeah, I've been blown away by the support my campaigns received. When I decided to run for school board, I didn't know how much I could raise, but I'd seen the previous record fundraising was about 10,000, not counting a self-funded candidate who spent about 12,000. So I sketched out 2 campaign budgets, one for 5,000, one for 10,000. And my wife and I decided that I'd need to raise all of that because these days we're putting all our extra dollars into college savings accounts for our 2 young boys. And then a funny thing happened. All sorts of donations started coming in, 20 bucks, 100, 250, even 1,000. Many of my longtime friends are lawyers and businessmen and have been quite successful. I'm fortunate that a few of them were willing to support my campaign. And I also received more donations, not huge donations, but a lot of them nationwide after I was invited to write a piece in the Wall Street Journal about running for my local school board on a centrist common sense platform. And then even more came when I posted my website link on Facebook and Twitter, where I have followings from my day job and otherwise. These donations are all from individuals, not corporations or political action committees. I think my largest corporate donation was $5 because somebody forgot to toggle their Venmo from their business to their personal account. And none of them have an agenda other than supporting my campaign, at least that I'm aware of. I don't know how I'm supposed to be beholden to many dozens of $100 donors across the country. But the biggest surprise has been the financial support from false church voters. Many local people I didn't know before the campaign have sent me money. I've actually received donations from 30 false church voters. I stopped actively fundraising months ago, but the donations kept coming. 2 weeks ago, I think after the latest attack in the news press, a local resident I didn't know sent me $1,000. I mean, this is not uncommon. I think I need to report Nick Benton, the editor, as an in-kind contributor to my campaign because he's raised all this ire to support me and ask for lawn signs and things like this. Just yesterday, I got a $250 check from another false church voter I didn't know. I admit I wasn't expecting this level of interest in my campaign, but clearly my message of accountability and responsiveness is resonating. I have 157 individual donors. More than half of them are local in terms of the DMV. This has been a real grassroots civic engaged effort of which I'm really proud.
Thank you. Courtney, how about you?
Sure. So for me, primarily, I have self-funded when I decided to do this. My husband and I put several $1,000s away, and I've also been extremely fortunate where I've had friends who've offered to host events and help with signs or hand things out or word of mouth, and a couple of donations here and there. But I am largely self-funded. And a lot of that is honestly a time thing. I work full time. I coach 4 days a week. I have a son who plays 2 other sports in addition to my coaching. So I have a lot of balls in the air at any given time. And so self-funding was the way to go for me. However, I will say this. The school board is a very thankless job. It's a nonpartisan job, and we have less than 2,600 students. I think every single person on this panel, down to the letter, regardless of where their money came from, is here because they care about our community and they care about our children. And I honestly don't have any problem with anyone, whether it's David, whether it's Ilya, whether it's Lori, Jared, Tate, Kathleen. I think every single person here is here for the right reasons and is going to be motivated by trying to do what's best for our kids and our school, regardless of whether that may look a little different and whether we may have different opinions on what that looks like.
Thank you, Courtney. Kathleen, what are your thoughts regarding it?
All right, thank you. Well, the short answer is I've raised about $3,500, all from Falls Church City residents, except for my parents and my sister. And I capped my donations at $100. I thought that was more than enough. And I feel like that is more than enough to run a successful campaign. If you are just involved in our community, I think it's not that hard to get to know our community and to get out there and get to know the voters. I do have some concerns. I don't question anybody's motives, and I'm not concerned about anybody. I'm not really concerned about people being beholden to outside donors. What concerns me is when I think there's just so much better use of money than spending tens and tens of thousands of dollars in our little city on this campaign. I think of just all the other ways that could be helpful in our community or outside of our community. So that is a bit of a concern. And then also, I just want to make sure our campaigns remain accessible. I would never want somebody who wants to serve our community to be too intimidated or overwhelmed at the thought of having to raise tens of thousands of dollars just to serve our community. I just want to make sure that our campaigns stay accessible to all. So I'm a big fan of just grassroots campaigning, getting out there, meeting the people. Of course, it takes some money, but I don't think it takes a lot of money to keep the playing field level.
Thank you, Kathleen. Lori, what are your thoughts regarding the campaign funding?
I too was really blown away just by putting up a link on my website and posting a few things on Facebook, the outpouring of support that I got from friends, family, both local people that I don't even know who made contributions to my campaign from $5 on up. It was just really humbling to know that people really believed in my campaign and believed in my message of being a thoughtful and reasonable voice, believed in my message on supporting teachers, supporting our kids with their academic, social, emotional needs. And that's why they gave to me. And that just really humbles me. In addition, the fundraising turned out way more successful than I thought it would. I was able to make contributions to the Falls Church Education Foundation. I believe I was the only candidate here who made a sizable contribution to the Tinner Hill Festival, which supports African-American heritage in our community. I was able to communicate my message with the voters. To me, it's not things cost money, absolutely. But in addition, I still have also walked about 1,500 doors so far, knocked on 1,500 doors. So to me, it's doing both. You need the money, but you also need the boots on the ground. I've got a team of about 5 people going out this weekend with me. And so it takes money, it takes boots on the ground, it takes everything. So again, thank you for all of you who have made contributions to my campaign, and it really means a lot to me.
Thank you, Lori. Tate.
Yes. When we started this, my wife and I, we had a discussion about how we were going to do this. And between the two of us, we decided that we wanted to run a self-funded campaign. So I am the only candidate.
You negotiated a better deal than I did, Tate.
All right. Yes. Well, that's true. I will not get into that. And hopefully I get an extra 10 seconds on that one. So, I'm the only candidate that is self-funded. I do not have a donation button on my website. My wife and I said this is part of our initiative to try to give back to the community, and we strongly believe that it starts when I'm running, not when I actually hopefully get on the board and give in terms of giving back. So the decision was for us is I wanted to avoid the appearance of owing any allegiances except to anyone except myself and the principles of why I'm running and the people that I'm connecting with. So that is on our yard sign. It says independent, and that is definitely true in terms of the donations. So we are not accepting any donations, but we are accepting a lot of help. If you've ever seen my really small campaign buttons that you probably haven't seen them, you realize I need a lot more help than just my campaign strategy. And I am constantly accepting help, and I am humbled that people are giving me help, from opening their living rooms and their backyards to walking around the community, to engaging, to sharing my message and what I'm about and my education experience and the things that I can provide to Falls Church City. So that is in terms of the donations. When it comes to grassroots, that is what we're using to really try to get my message out there. And I'm still asking for help. I'm going to be asking for help all the way up till 7 o'clock on election day, because I know as the only self-funded campaign candidate, it takes a lot more when you don't have any of those kind of funds. And so I'm really working hard to earn everybody's vote. I'm really working hard to make sure they know who I am. And I'm incredibly appreciative of the folks that are helping me out every day to try to get my message out.
Great. Thank you so much, Tate. We're going to move on to the next question. And this question is from the PTAs. And it's a short answer, so you have a minute to answer this one. And the question is, as the school division employs almost 400 full-time staff, how will you take in feedback from staff and try to act on that feedback? And Ilya, you're the first person on the list.
Well, as I mentioned before, I think the interests of staff and teachers can diverge from those of administrators. So I don't think it's right to channel everything through the central office. I think there should be independent, third-party run climate surveys regularly of teachers, so we know what their needs are, whether it's their own compensation, whether it's what they need for their classrooms or just other things they notice in their schools. There should also be direct lines of communication to the school board as part of my office hours. And I'm gratified that current school board members have picked up on my idea for having that. I'm going to spread that around, not just Liberty Barbecue, but lots of establishments around town. Teachers are going to be welcome, certainly, to come to that. And if they wish, they can email me confidentially or contact me confidentially, unless it's like a must report, like an evidence of a crime or something. And I just, I think they are very important stakeholders, and we ought to consider things like housing allowances or other things to make it, more competitive than just on salary, so that they feel like real valued members of the community.
Thank you, Ilya. Lori, the question goes to you next.
Our staff and teachers really have to have an authentic voice when they are working for our children. And from my understanding, in order to act on feedback that we've gotten from the teachers and staff, we also have to ask them what that feedback should be. And I've actually spoken to a bunch of teachers so far this year, and they really haven't been given the opportunity to give any real feedback. I would love for there to be continuous, ongoing abilities for teachers and staff to be able to anonymously give their input and tell us exactly what they need in their classrooms in order to really feel supported by the administration, by the community, because we have such a strong community who's willing to do so much for them, but we just have to ask. And I want to make sure that they are asked and heard, and so that we can then act on that feedback.
Great, thank you, Lori. Jared, how would you act on the feedback?
So I think it's very important to get get feedback from teachers in multiple ways. I think it's very important to get a broad-based sense from annual surveys developed in collaboration with them, because they understand what's going on in the classrooms, I think, better than anybody else. So it's very important to have that kind of broad-based information. But I've talked to several teachers and those who have been in the school system for at least a decade said to me that school board members used to come into the schools and actually have office hours there, and teachers could come and talk to them. And I think they talked about it nostalgically. And I think it's because we are such a small school system that we should ensure that whatever policies and how the school board acts is conducive. It takes advantage of that smallness. I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people enjoy Falls Church, is because it's so small. And I think we should ensure that the actions that we take advantage of that as well.
Thank you, Jared. Kathleen, how about you?
Thank you. So I have 4 kids in 3 schools that they all started here in kindergarten. And so I did the math the other day, and I think we've had close to 50 teachers over the years. And I'm so proud to have been able to work closely with them. I was always a room parent. And when you get to know the teachers, they know what they need. They know they are the professionals. And so it is so important that they have a voice and that they are able to accurately and safely express that and get what they need and have a voice at the table. So I think it's important that we do anything we can to make sure that they feel heard and supported. Again, like a lot of the ideas already put up there, like office hours and surveys. And I know that I'm sure they're exploring collective bargaining, and I think that will be an important part of giving them a voice, and how that would look in our community remains to be seen. But I think anything we can do to support them having a voice, and trusting them as professionals to help guide decisions from the school board.
Thank you, Kathleen. Tate, how would you take in feedback and act on it?
Yeah, so the first part is taking in that feedback, and there are the formal and the informal ways of gathering that feedback from teachers. So we do have existing committees. Some of them are the SEEK and the PEAK and the committees that are working. Some of them are not where they need to be. So we need to focus on getting those committees to have the representation, to have those teachers at the table and being heard, not just at the table. So those are some of the formal ways. Collective bargaining is a clear way to make sure teachers and staff have a seat at the table, the decision-making table, to have those voices heard. The other formal ways, including the office hours, which has been a concept for, I think, over 1,000 years. Sorry, Ilya, it did not just come up this summer. But those office hours, those concepts of, we're going to meet somewhere and let's meet together, and you can find us and you know where to get us and engage with us. I mean, that works in universities, that works in boards. There's a lot of different ways to make sure that we can have those kind of connections. So all those ways are making sure that, like we've all said, this is a small community. Let's make sure we take advantage of that with our intimate conversations.
Thank you, Tate. David, you're next. How would you answer that?
Hi there. I'd like to make sure that we hear the voices of teachers and staff in three ways. The first is informal, through a group of 2 school board members visiting each school at least once a month to allow teachers and staff to talk directly to them. The second 2 are more formal, as Tate said. One is an annual engagement survey conducted by a third party. And then the third is to ensure that there's actually a record of the teacher's voice in the decision-making process of the board. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that that voice was included in the documentation that was available to the public as we deliberate and make decisions. There's ways to do that, and I think that that's something that I'd like to discuss with my colleagues if I'm lucky to be enough to be elected.
Great, thank you, David. Courtney.
Yes, so I think I echo a lot of my fellow candidates in this, and that I think that it's important that we provide multiple avenues for the teachers and staff at our schools to voice their concerns and capture information about their needs. What I would add to everything that I've been hearing also, though, is I think it is critical that our school board set the tone that we are looking for these things from our teachers, that we want them to be honest and transparent and non-hesitant about coming to us or providing that feedback. Because in speaking with a lot of teachers over the last 18 months and a lot of people in general, I think that one of the things that I hear over and over again is that people certainly have thoughts and concerns about what they want or what they need or what they think their directions may be, but they're hesitant to voice it. They're hesitant to come to the table and talk about it openly. And so I think that we have a critical mission with our school board to set the tone that we welcome these conversations and that we want to engage in them.
Thank you, Courtney. The next question, you have 2 minutes to answer this one. When the next school board begins its session in January, for the members, which is a majority of the members, will be new to governing. What is your understanding of school board governance, and how would you seek to educate yourself about it? And we're going to start with Jared on this question.
Sure. So, going in, I know that there are trainings that the state puts on, the state Board of Education puts on for school board members, and Dr. Noonan has already informed all of us of the of some of those that are coming up in I think the second or third week in November. And I think it's very important to understand all the laws around what the school board is and is not allowed to do. But I do think that in terms of governance, it's the school board's there to represent the community. The schools, the public schools are governed by the school board. That school board is elected, and it's there to represent the values of the community, the views of the community, and implement those so that the children get educated as best they can. And I think it's important that that is always always at the forefront. And so ensuring that happens through strategic planning, through proper budgeting, through ensuring that the strategic plan is being carried out through evaluation and measurement. I think all those things are the appropriate role of the board, and ensuring, and that will help ensure that our children get the best education they can.
Great, thank you, Jared. Ilya, what are your thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, well, I think I've spoken to this a fair bit. I'm going to study Robert's Rules of Order to make sure that the meetings run smoothly, that I can play an active role to make sure that the board is active and engages in the things that we're going to be elected. The majority of us that are going to be elected in 12 days. I moved to Falls Church. My wife and I did for the same reason most of you did, because of our great schools. And I want all kids here to have the best educational opportunities. And so I don't have a big agenda to impose lots of radical reforms on the schools, though I've heard from many of you about issues to address. I mostly want to reform the school board. So I'm definitely going to continue studying, continue reading board docs and guidance from the state association. I want all parents, teachers, staff, members of the community to feel that their views are heard and respected, and I'm going to execute that. And whether it's learning loss, I'm gratified that the board finally got around to asking some tough questions of the superintendent at last week's meeting. Why didn't they do that before? And instead of acknowledging problems and working to fix them, papering over deficiencies, which seem to hit racial minorities and underprivileged communities the hardest. So I want to make sure that if we're talking about equity, if we're talking about learning loss, if we're talking about the middle, the students in the middle that get lost in the shuffle, that we're really, not just talking about it, that we're doing something about it. And I'm going to use all the tools at my disposal, the board docs, the guidance, the rules, to make sure that we can execute and work collectively and make sure that we can marshal all the great resources of everyone who's on this virtual stage, to make the school board much more effective and engaged than it's been the last few years.
Thank you, Ilya. So Tate, what is your understanding of the school board governance, and how would you seek to educate yourself about it?
Okay, and I'll stop salivating on trying to answer this question because everybody knows I'm going to be excited about this one. So yes, I'm excited and looking forward to being on the school board. I mean, I have in my, and again, we can do a game on how many times I say the word 25 years in education experience. I have sat on many school board meetings. I have run many school board meetings. I have consulted to help improve school boards from a policy standpoint, from working in the politics of school boards. I've seen school boards at the state level, at the district level. So this is a significant amount of my experience. That thankfully I will not have the learning curve around what is a school board, what's its role, how does it operate with the community or with the superintendent. So I'm ready to go from day one, but I want to make sure I am serving on school board for Falls Church City. And that might not be the same as the different school boards I've worked with across the country at the state or the district level. So that's what I've been doing. I've been listening the last several months. I've been trying to gather as much community feedback to make sure that we are focused on our community and how this school board can serve Falls Church City, its students, its parents, its teachers, its staff. So in terms of the three big areas of a school board, in terms of budget, I have significant experience with federal and state education budgets, not just budgets, but education budgets. I run 3 companies and they're all private sector. I have private sector budget experience. I know about accountability. So this is in terms of fiscal accountability. In terms of education policy, 2 of my 3 advanced degrees are in education policy. So this is all I've done from a graduate level. A statistician, researcher, all in education policy. So I understand from that perspective. And then finally, working with superintendents. I've worked with superintendents, Republican superintendents and Democratic superintendents, first name basis, working with them across the country. So in terms of working with superintendents on implementing, and I'm looking forward to that relationship as well. So I'm ready to go. So
thank you, Tate. Next up is Courtney.
Sure. So I'm a big fan of leaning into the resources at your disposal. And, the last 18 months, I think that I've actually done that very consistently. When I decided to get involved in trying to create a productive and constructive conversation around our children not being in school. I've watched every single school board meeting. I've talked to school board members. I have met with people throughout this community. I am very much in the loop as far as the dynamics and the discussions that have been ongoing with our school board. So as far as that perspective goes, I think I'm quite prepared to hit the ground running as far as that goes. And if Tate doesn't get elected, he's going to be my best friend because I want to know all the things that he knows. But I think we do have some amazing resources in this community. And that's one of the things that I actually learned the most is asking questions, asking people, get me up to speed, leaning into the people who are the experts beyond just your own understanding. So while I do feel quite prepared, I am a fast thinker, I'm a quick learner, and I'm ready to learn about the procedures. I'm ready to undergo all of the training. I'm ready to ask questions of the experts and the people who have been there. And it's been a pleasure being able to speak to a lot of the people who have been doing this job in this community before and currently. And I look forward to engaging those conversations even further as we go along.
Great, thank you, Courtney. Lori, how would you, or what is your understanding of school board governance, and how would you seek to educate yourself about it?
I'm somebody who's pretty honest and forthcoming about myself, and I think that I know what I know, and I'm honest about the things that I don't know. And when I just first decided to run for school board back in May, I didn't know much about the school board and its functions. I mean, I'd heard school governance, I'd heard policy, budget, and hiring and firing of the superintendent, and evaluation of the superintendent. I didn't know that much more. Over the past May, June, July, August, September, 4 months, whatever it's been, I've spoken to many people in the community who are experts in this area. I've got former board members who are advising me heavily in my campaign and giving me a lot of ideas and insight as to this governance piece and what needs to be done and the best way to approach things. I've got friends on other school boards. For example, the chair of the Arlington School Board is a good friend of mine. She's been advising me and teaching me. And if in 12 days from now, I am privileged enough to serve on the school board here, I will continue those conversations and keep learning. Yeah, Tate, you're going to be my best friend too. And continue to, I've got other board members who I haven't met with who, former board members who I have offered their services as well. I've reached out to the current board and talked to them about their ideas. And again, just keep talking and learning. I feel like I've gone, from 0 to 60 within a second on my knowledge, and I plan to keep going with that speed and that energy.
Great, thank you, Lori. And David, you're up next.
Thanks, Cecily. Governance is the process by which an organization makes decisions, and a school board is a collective group that has to jointly make decisions about the functioning of its schools. And so, if I'm lucky enough to be elected, I'm very happy that Dr. Noonan has a set of trainings as well as the Virginia School Board Association. And that helps one to get up to speed on the specifics regarding both FCCPS and Virginia state law, to the degree that we've all been reading that. But I'm not starting from zero on that. In my day job, I oversee a large organization that's responsible for our electric grid. In addition, I serve on the board of Creative Cauldron, and I've been a member of their Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion committee as well. So I'm familiar with the process by which one has to work, as well as work with fellow board members, as well as to inquire within the organization. And the role and the attitude can be summed up quite simply, and that is noses in, fingers out. And that's about asking questions, making sure that you have all the information that you need, and really making sure that you dig in. The last piece, though, is that all of us on the school board, the 4 of us that are lucky enough to get elected, and the ones who remain, can't do everything. We have to choose various committees to work on. And I think we'll have to work together to understand which aspects of our schools we're really truly going to master, and which ones we are going to work more collectively with our colleagues on. And I look forward to that conversation if I'm lucky enough to be elected.
Thank you, David. And Kathleen, how about you, and what are your thoughts?
Okay, thanks. So yes, of course, I would be new to serving on a school board, but I would not be new to governance. In addition to having been president of my preschool board and the PTA board, I've been serving on our Mary Riley Stiles Public Library Board of Trustees for several years now. And it does echo a very similar model. We work very closely with the library director. We have a very healthy relationship with her, and support her in advising the governance of the library, and holding her responsible and the financial responsibilities. So I do think I have a lot of good experience there that I think is a parallel to the kinds of decisions that the school board might be making, in some ways at a bigger scale. I also have been spent the last probably about 6 years helping current and former school board members in our community run their campaigns and serve their terms. I have really strong relationships with several current and former school board members. So that has really given me a lot of insight into what the role looks like and how demanding it is and what the challenges and the benefits of the role are. So I think that will also help me. And then I know that there are several trainings, as people have already alluded to, with the state and local trainings and conferences. So I would look forward to using those opportunities to learn as much as I can. I look forward to doing that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. And we're going to move on to our last question, and it's not the last question ever, or the totality of all the questions that the PTA and the CBC wish they could have asked. There are many more that we had to cull through. But this is the last one for this evening. And this is a really important one, I really think. I mean, they've all been important, but this one is more forward-looking. Most of you have mentioned in the previous forums and writings that you began to pay attention to the school board deliberations and decisions when it was making the decisions around COVID. Beyond COVID, what do you see as major issues currently facing FCCPS now and in the next year, and then over the next 3 years? And we're going to start with David. And you will have 2 minutes to answer this question.
I'm sorry, Cecily,
David or Tate?
did you
I think you
call
said
me or
David, right?
Tate?
Go for it, David. I'll punt it to you.
I said David, yes. David?
Oh, me. Okay, very good. Okay, I'm sorry. So the League of Women Voters asked a similar question, and the schools, being such a central part of our community, are going to have to lead us out of COVID. And COVID is actually not going away, as we've learned, but we've now learned to manage it. And we have the aftermath and then the path forward. And we're going to be dealing with this, and we've discussed it a little bit already in this forum, and I've discussed it in the prior forums. We need to address the social and emotional learning, as well as the social and mental health of our teachers. Younger students missed out on some of the critical emotional growth years of their life. Older students and teenagers missed out on some of the key social development that occurs for them, and it had its tremendous toll, and we can never get those times back. Teachers worked amazingly hard, and they're, and I appreciate their contributions so much, but I understand also how hard it was. And therefore, we need to really address those issues, because if we're not healthy moving forward, we're going to have a hard time meeting our other goals. The next is really following through on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're a relatively small, mostly white district, yet we still have these challenges with respect to racism, but we also have a commitment in our community and in our schools to develop global learners who build a more just world. In order to do that, we're going to have to make sure that we really truly engage and really develop and make sure that those policies aren't just a set of policies with a bunch of trainings. And I don't want to minimize that importance, but really that those goals are integrated into our learning as well. And then third, we're going to have to address all of the different learning gaps that have occurred. And I know that, some parents have very significant concerns about where their children were now versus where they were then, but every child, no matter how well they might have done, really struggled. And that's going to be a tremendously important aspect of us moving forward.
Thank you, David. Courtney.
Sure, thank you. So First, I do want to make clear that, my day-to-day job is actually to inform and educate providers over complex medical information and changing guidelines and research and science in the field of genetics, which is actually also a very evolving field. So when it comes to COVID, I actually am quite qualified and knowledgeable when it comes to the science and the information and how we can have these types of discussions and be forward thinking with our children. And this isn't something that's going to go away. So I think that we need to be having these kind of conversations about what we want our goals to be looking like, how we can minimize disruption for our children, give them normalcy. And these are all important discussions that are very much going to be on the table over the next year. And coupled with that, I think, as David has talked about, is the social emotional impact of both the mitigations and the lost learning and developmental phases for our children, and the academic loss that we have had over the last 18 months, and how we are going to supplement and get our kids where we want them to be. So I think that that's going to be something that's going to be very much on our plate. Additionally, right now, the state of Virginia is undergoing a reevaluation and update of their math curriculum. I think that math and science in this country is a critically important focus if we want to be competitive on a global scale. I think that we need to be spending a lot of time and energy discussing how we look to implement some of these math curriculum updates, where we want to put our resources, how we want to offer math and science within our school system to ensure that our kids are going on to the next step in their lives successfully and well prepared when they are looking at college, and that we're keeping them competitive. So I think curriculum discussions are going to be very important over the coming next couple of years as well. And then the other piece that I would like to start introducing is technical training exposure. College isn't for everyone, and I think we need to give our children some resources around alternatives.
Thank you so much. Jared, you are next.
Thank you. Yes, so as David and Courtney said, we are still dealing with the effects of COVID, the social and emotional health of our students, our families, our teachers. Teacher burnout is a huge issue. We also have a bus driver shortage. All these things are, in the short term, very important, but these effects will go with us for a while. The learning loss has been, I think, it has hit a lot of people hard. There was a 60% pass rate for math in 6th grade. That is a shocking number that was presented to the board in the last board meeting. And those issues are, that has to be addressed. And so all those things have to be currently addressed. I do think it's very important to ensure that the resources that English learners need get to them. Not only just because of COVID, because they are some of the students that need the most resources. I think it's important to ensure that when we're thinking about spending resources, we ensure that it goes to those who need it most. One of the things that I think is very important for strategic planning and for budgetary planning is that the student enrollment is currently about 150 less than it was in the average of 2017, 2018, and 2019. And so, we need to know where those students went. Are they coming back? What is the impact of the budget going to be? If they all come back, we're going to have to hire more teachers. So all those things are super important, and that's gonna be with us for a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Tate, questions to you next.
Yeah, so clearly we've addressed the COVID, which is it requires a lot of time to discuss. But when we talk about 3 years out, we're going to be talking about a number of policies. There's going to be a number of issues that we're going to be facing, and I'll try to address them as I possibly predict when they will come in. But one of the ones that I think is collective bargaining, that is going to be on the horizon for teachers and staff to discuss and to start to bargain with the school board. And that's an important piece for our teachers and staff to ensure that they feel that they've got the right authority, decision-making, and our school board, we have to have the experience to work with them. And I do have experience with school board and our collective bargaining agreements and worked on that for a number of years. And I look forward to working with our teachers and staff representatives to get a good collective bargaining agreement to ensure we not just retain, but we recruit great teachers and staff. The other, to Courtney's point, she's absolutely right. The math curriculum is an important piece that we're going to have to be discussing and we're going to have to be revisiting. And I, as a former high school math teacher, national board certified math teacher, I have worked on a number of different math curriculum reforms with the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics since the mid-90s. So I'm looking forward to being able to take that hat and help out with that understanding of how do we ensure that our math curriculum is understandable. How do we make sure that students know what they're going through, and how do we make sure that they have the right steps? Other policies that I think we need to focus on: school board governance. We need to ensure that our governance of our school board is evolving and it's maturing. There are a number of different evolutions of school boards across the country that we could be doing and revisiting. We also should be thinking about the concept of looking at our standards-based grading and doing a revisiting of that to make sure it is still meeting the needs of where teachers and parents and students are. And finally, another policy that I think is going to be coming is this IT, this reflection of how is our information technology, how is our use of IT, both from an instruction, but also non-instruction, being used effectively or efficiently in our schools.
Thank you. Ilya, the question goes to you next.
Thanks. One really important thing is staffing. Again, this is part of the climate survey of teachers that we've discussed before. I don't want to belabor it, but I do want to make sure that as competition for good teachers increases, we're doing everything we can to offer not just good pay, but look at their work environments, look at what they really needs. Concomitant with both the short to medium term and the post-COVID world is, again, learning loss. It's only after a couple of us, I think Jared and I, began asking questions on Facebook about the superintendent's slide deck on the latest standard of learning results that board members began taking this seriously. Before that, there was an extraordinary exercise in spin to cover up for a noticeable slide in academic performance. Slide after slide talked about non-data metrics like equity, which, as I said, isn't doing great either, and how wonderful IB is. It was all coached as an exercise in modernizing data collection and finding subjective metrics that tell our story better than objective ones, apparently at the board's request. So I pulled the raw data for Falls Church into its own spreadsheet. With the exception of a couple of reading scores, our passage rates for Black, Hispanic, ESOL, and students with disabilities dropped significantly more than for the general student population. It's mind-boggling that the superintendent's presentation did not even mention this, while at the same time proclaiming that we need to focus on the needs of individual students, because that's equity. Equity would actually be confronting the fact that our schools failed these and other students last year. That's the first step toward figuring out what to do about it. Equity is not patting ourselves on the back for renaming schools that are failing disadvantaged students. Why does the current board even want to move the goalposts on learning loss and move to non-data driven performance assessments? Dr. Noonan earlier had papered over the fact that we have student attrition clustered in the ESOL group. He kind of guessed that it was because their parents got jobs elsewhere and not because they wanted to guarantee open schools where they weren't being jerked around, schools with fewer days off, or pausing and quarantining of asymptomatic students that leave parents scrambling. Trabajaré para que todos los niños reciban una buena educación. Thanks very much. I'd like your vote.
Kathleen.
All right, thank you, Cecily. I really appreciate this question. This might be my favorite one of the night. I think the context of the question is important in terms of there being a new majority coming in. That was actually one of the reasons why I decided to run. I thought I actually know several of the people who have chosen not to run or who are not joining the board, and I'm not convinced that it's some sort of terribly toxic environment with no loss of trust. I think they're humans that all have their own individual reasons for making their choices. I think I have not also just come to this because of COVID. I've been serving our schools and our community for 9 years now. So I've been paying attention and been a part of these conversations for a long time. The only part of COVID that influenced my decision to run was kind of having sort of a front seat to all of the decision making when the world shut down in spring of 2020, and actually just being taken aback by the leadership across the board and these incredibly hardworking people making a lot of difficult decisions in good faith, and not always perfect decisions by any means, but getting to see upfront all of the different factors that go into these decisions. So I've been paying attention for a long time, and I'm not running because I'm mad at how the schools handled COVID. Quite the opposite. Not because it was done perfectly, but because it was done with a lot of hard work and a lot of decisions done in good faith with so many moving pieces. So looking forward, my biggest concern is our lack of diversity as a community. And I think we have a housing crisis in our community that's only going to get worse. We're losing affordable housing by the day without a dramatic an important plan to replace it and increase it. And while that doesn't sound like a school board issue, it's a community issue. And if city council makes it a priority, I think it'd be important for the school board to support that priority. There's a limited amount of resources in our town, and equity takes sacrifice. And I think if we want to be in a community where the people who work here can afford to live here and our schools represent everyone, it's going to take a lot of sacrifice and hard work. Thanks.
Thank you. And Lori.
One thing that I'm really excited to do, I think it's going to come up soon after the new board is sworn in, from my understanding with meeting with the FCCEA, is that collective bargaining is going to be on the table. And I have been an extreme vocal supporter of collective bargaining for our teachers. Now, this is not me telling them that they need to collectively bargain. This is me giving them the right to vote for themselves, whether they choose to collectively bargain or not. I would be giving them that right to choose for themselves. I've said all along that I am not just a yes vote, but I'm going to work my hardest to make sure that there are 3 other yes votes with me. This is important for the teachers and the kids. You know, you can't have great schools without great teachers. You can't have great teachers unless they have competitive pay, competitive benefits, feel like they have an authentic voice with their superiors, and feel the safety and security and respect that they need in order to voice their concerns. All those things that go into making great teachers also make great schools and a great whole education process for our kids and great community. In terms of academic, social, emotional support, honestly, I don't think these needs are going away anytime soon. So when you talk 3 years out, I think we're going to still be dealing with the effects of COVID from in academic, social, emotional needs, even 3 years out. Looking at the strategic plan, I think that we need to really be looking at that in order to determine how we use our resources and use our energies in order to ensure that people are getting the resources that they need, the students and also the teachers and staff, because they can't do their jobs unless they feel supported. And so that's kind of a couple of things that I want to do if I'm elected on the school board. And again, just thank you for having us tonight. That's probably around the last question. So just wanted to thank you while I had a chance to. And I hope everybody's vote.
Thank you so much. And candidates, thank you for being here tonight and sharing your thoughts with the community. I was looking a little while ago, we had over 112 participants, which is double what they had for city council. So I think the community appreciated the engagement that we had tonight and the questions and everything. So thank you for your time, candidates, and thank you for your time, voters. And I'm going to turn it back over to Hal.
And good gracious, I've got a 40-minute closing statement that I think I will cut down significantly. Thanks, everybody. Really, really, really thanks. Wonderful job. I have it boilerplate, sincere thanks. Jared, Tate, Courtney, David, Ilya, Lori, and Kathleen. 2 thumbs up from me. Thanks. Interesting, informative, and thoughtful. Thanks also especially to Cecily for her contributions as the moderator, and to the behind the scenes CBC and PTA planning and tech support crew, Carolyn Bruce, Pete Davis, Sally Eckfeldt. Lastly, I'll close with 2 items. 1, a thank you to all of those who took time out of their busy schedules to view the forum. The video link will be posted on the CBC website, which is www.fallschurch.cbc.net in a day or so. And 2, the customary reminder, if you haven't already done so, please be sure to vote on November 2nd. Again, thanks to all and good night.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Cecily.
everyone.
Thanks, Hal. Thanks, Cecily.